Have you ever had a nightmare so vivid that when you woke up, you weren't sure if it was real? That disorienting moment when your brain can't distinguish between dream and memory? Now imagine if someone told you that your most horrific nightmares weren't dreams at all, but memories. Memories your conscious mind had suppressed to protect you. That's what they told me 6 weeks ago when I began the experimental memory recovery therapy known as Recall Protocol. My name is Alex Mercer. At least that's who I am in this timeline. I should start at the beginning, though I'm no longer certain where that is anymore. For years, I'd been plagued by the same recurring nightmare. I'm standing in a sterile white room. There's blood on my hands. A woman lies motionless on the floor, her face always blurred in my memory. Someone is pounding on a locked door, trying to get in. My therapist, Dr. Levine, had tried everything. Traditional analysis, EMDR, hypnosis. Nothing worked. The nightmare persisted, 3 to 4 times a week, leaving me exhausted and increasingly paranoid. There's a new treatment protocol, Dr. Levine told me during our session 6 weeks ago. Experimental, but showing promising results for patients with recurring nightmares linked to repressed trauma. What kind of treatment? I asked. It's called Recall Protocol. It uses a combination of targeted neurochemical therapy and guided meditation to access blocked memories. The theory is that your nightmares are fragments of traumatic memories your brain has walled off. You think my nightmare is real? The idea seemed absurd. That I actually killed someone? Dr. Levine adjusted her glasses. Not necessarily. The mind often uses symbolic imagery to represent emotional trauma. The blood could symbolize guilt about something entirely different. I was desperate enough to try anything. The nightmares were affecting my job, my relationships. I hadn't had a full night's sleep in months. Where do I sign up? The Recall Protocol facility wasn't what I expected. Rather than the clinical hospital setting I'd imagined, it was a converted Victorian mansion on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by old oak trees. The sign at the entrance read, Theseus Institute for Cognitive Research. Dr. Eleanor Chen, the lead researcher, greeted me personally. She was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, with an intensity in her eyes that was both reassuring and slightly unnerving. Mr. Mercer, welcome. We're going to help you find the truth behind your nightmares. The first session was mostly paperwork and preliminary tests. Brain scans, blood work, psychological evaluations. They were particularly interested in my family history, though I didn't have much to tell them. Perfect candidate, I overheard one technician say to another as they reviewed my scans. When I asked what that meant, they exchanged glances. Your neural pathways show unusual activity in the hippocampus and amygdala, Dr. Chen explained. It suggests your brain is actively suppressing something significant. The actual treatment began the following day. I was led to a comfortable room with subdued lighting, reclining chair, and an array of monitoring equipment. A technician attached electrodes to my temples and the base of my skull. The procedure has 3 phases, Dr. Chen explained, as she prepared a syringe with clear fluid. First, we administer a compound that temporarily increases neuroplasticity, making your brain more receptive to accessing sealed memories. Then, using targeted sound frequencies, we guide you into a theta brain state similar to deep meditation. Finally, we use verbal cues to help you access specific memory clusters. Will it hurt? I asked, eyeing the needle. You'll feel pressure, possibly discomfort as memories surface. But no physical pain. She paused. I should warn you, though. Emotional pain is another matter. Confronting repressed trauma is never easy. The injection felt cold entering my bloodstream. Within minutes, the room began to shift around me. Colors became more vibrant, sounds sharper. Dr. Chen's voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Close your eyes, Alex. Focus on my voice. We're going to revisit your nightmare, but this time, you're going to see it clearly. No blurred faces, no missing pieces. A low, pulsing tone filled the room, and I felt myself sinking deeper into the chair. The boundary between consciousness and unconsciousness began to blur. You're in a white room, Dr. Chen's voice guided. Look around. What do you see? And suddenly I was there, not remembering the nightmare, but living it. The white room materialized around me with perfect clarity. But it wasn't a room. It was a laboratory. Advanced equipment lined the walls. A large window overlooked what appeared to be a containment chamber. I'm in a lab, I heard myself say, my voice distant and dreamy. Good. Now look down at your hands. I did. They were covered in blood, just like in my nightmare. But now I could see more. The blood was smeared up my lab coat sleeves. I was wearing a badge. Dr. Alexander Mercer, Temporal Dynamics Division. There's so much blood, I whispered. I'm wearing a lab coat. I'm a doctor? Keep going. Who else is in the room? I turned slowly. The woman from my nightmares lay on the floor, but her face was no longer blurred. I could see her clearly. Asian, mid-30s, wearing a lab coat identical to mine. My heart nearly stopped. It's You're the woman in my nightmare, but you're dead. In my peripheral vision, I saw the real Dr. Chen stiffen, but her voice remained calm. Stay in the memory, Alex. Why am I on the floor? What happened? Before I could answer, pounding on the laboratory door grew louder. Voices shouted from the other side. Security breach in Sector 7. Dr. Mercer, open the door. In the memory, I looked down at my hand. I wasn't holding a weapon as I'd always thought in my nightmares. It was a small device, roughly the size of a smartphone, with a glowing blue interface now spattered with blood. They're coming for me, I said, my voice rising with panic, both in the memory and in the treatment room. I have to activate it. It's the only way. Activate what, Alex? Dr. Chen pressed. The protocol. The recall protocol. The pounding on the door grew louder. In the memory, I looked at Dr. Chen's body, whispered, "I'm sorry," then pressed my bloody thumb against the device's interface. A blinding flash of blue light erupted from the device, enveloping me. Excruciating pain tore through every cell in my body. I was being unmade, disassembled at the molecular level. In the treatment room, I began to convulse. Alarms from the monitoring equipment blared. I heard Dr. Chen shouting for assistance. Then everything went black. I woke up in a hospital bed. Not the treatment room at Theseus Institute, but an actual hospital. Dr. Chen sat beside my bed, studying me with an expression I couldn't quite read. What happened? My throat felt raw, as if I'd been screaming. You had a seizure during the treatment, she said. Quite severe. We had to terminate the session. The memory, I started, was very vivid, she finished for me. What you experienced may be symbolic rather than literal, but we both knew she was lying. I had seen her face, her dead face, in my recovered memory, and she had recognized herself there too. Why am I in a hospital, I asked. Standard procedure when a research subject experiences adverse effects. You'll be released tomorrow if your tests come back normal. She stood to leave. We should discontinue your participation in the study. No, I said firmly. I need to know what that memory means. Why I was in a lab. Why you were dead on the floor. What the recall protocol actually is. Dr. Chen studied me for a long moment. Are you certain what you experienced was just the surface? Going deeper could be destabilizing. I've been destabilized my entire life by these nightmares. I need answers. 3 days later, I was back at the Theseus Institute. This time the security seemed tighter. I noticed cameras tracking my movement. Guards positioned discreetly at hallway intersections. Dr. Chen led me to a different room, smaller, more heavily equipped. The monitoring apparatus was more extensive. 2 additional researchers joined us, introducing themselves as specialists in temporal cognition, whatever that meant. Today we're using a stronger compound, Dr. Chen explained, preparing the injection. It will allow you to access deeper memory layers, but it also carries greater risks. You may experience disorientation, confusion between memory and present reality. I understand. Try to remember its purpose, how it works. The injection burned this time. The room dissolved around me faster, more violently than before. I was back in the laboratory, but earlier, before the blood, before Dr. Chen's body on the floor. I was working at a holographic interface, unlike any technology I'd seen in my waking life. Data streams flowed through the air around me. Equations and models too complex for my current self to understand. Dr. Chen, alive, focused, worked at a station across from me. The temporal divergence is growing, she said without looking up. Every simulation ends the same way. Catastrophic timeline collapse within 30 days. There has to be another solution, I heard myself say. The protocol is theoretical, untested. We don't know what it will do to the subject. We know exactly what it will do, Alex. It will unmake them in this timeline and reconstruct them in another, one where they made different choices. But their consciousness will remain intact. Memories will be suppressed but recoverable. It's the only way to prevent what's coming. I moved to another workstation where the device from my nightmare sat in a charging cradle. My hands, steady, confident, made adjustments to its components. Even if it works, I said, how do we choose? Who decides which version of reality survives? Dr. Chen finally looked up at me, her expression grim. What matters is preserving enough consciousness to rebuild in a stable alternate. A notification flashed across the holographic display. Dr. Chen's face paled. They know, she whispered. Security has been compromised. They're coming. How long? Minutes, maybe less. Then we have no choice. We implement now. Alex, wait. Dr. Chen moved toward me. The targeting isn't calibrated. We don't know which timeline you'll end up in. Better an unknown timeline than a dead one. Alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Red emergency lights pulsed. A computerized voice announced, "Security breach. Unauthorized access to Temporal Dynamics Division. All personnel evacuate immediately." Dr. Chen grabbed my arm. "You can't do this alone. The neural load will kill you." "Then help me," I said, extending the device toward her. co-pilot the transfer. She hesitated only briefly before placing her hand beside mine on the device. The blue glow intensified, spreading up our arms like luminescent veins. Calibrating for dual consciousness transfer, I said, fingers dancing across the interface. Alex, Dr. Chen's voice softened. Not right away. We'll be living different lives. The laboratory door shuddered under impact. Someone was trying to break in. Transfer initiating in 10 seconds, the device announced in a pleasant female voice. Dr. Chen looked at me, tears in her eyes. Promise you'll find me. I promise. The door burst open. Men in tactical gear poured in, weapons raised. I saw Dr. Chen reach for something. A failsafe control. One of the intruders fired. The bullet hit her in the chest. She fell. Complete the transfer, she gasped, blood bubbling at her lips. Find me. The men were shouting, ordering me to put down the device. I held Dr. Chen with one arm, the device with my other hand. Her blood smeared across its surface as I pressed my thumb to the activation panel. Recall protocol activated, the pleasant female voice announced. Timeline transfer commencing. Blue light exploded outward from the device. The armed men disintegrated into particles before my eyes. The laboratory walls dissolved. Dr. Chen's body grew transparent in my arms. The last thing I saw was her eyes, determined even in death. Then the universe tore itself apart around me. In the treatment room, I was screaming, thrashing against the restraints they had apparently applied after my first seizure. The monitoring equipment was going haywire. One of the specialists was shouting about neural cascade failure. He's remembering, she whispered. Actually remembering. Then darkness claimed me again. I dreamed of other lives, hundreds of them, thousands. In some I was a doctor, in others a teacher, a criminal, a father, a vagrant. In each one, something was wrong, a sense of incompleteness, of being untethered from reality. Not a hospital this time, but what appeared to be a secure residential suite within the Theseus Institute. How long was I out? My voice was hoarse. 3 days, she said. Your brain needed time to integrate the recovered memories. I sat up slowly. They weren't nightmares, were they? They were actual memories, from another timeline. She nodded. From the original timeline. And you remember too? That's why you created the Theseus Institute. To find others like me. Not exactly. She moved her chair closer to my bed. I created the Institute to find you specifically, Alex. Only you. Because of the promise. Yes. The pieces were falling into place now. The recall protocol wasn't just a memory recovery therapy. It was a technology we developed, in that other timeline, to transfer consciousness across realities. Correct, though other timeline isn't quite accurate. It would be more precise to say primary timeline, the one from which all others diverged. And it was collapsing. We were trying to save what? Humanity? Consciousness itself? Dr. Chen's expression grew distant. We were part of a classified research division studying temporal physics. We discovered that reality is far more fragile than anyone realized. Certain decision points create divergent timelines, but not all timelines are equally stable. The primary timeline, our timeline, had become critically unstable due to a cascade of quantum decisions made by key individuals. Including me, I said, memories continuing to surface. I made a choice that contributed to the instability. We all did, but you also created the solution. The recall protocol was designed to transfer the consciousness of critical individuals to alternate, stable timelines where different choices had been made. But in the process, something went wrong. I remembered the blood, the armed men, the desperate activation. You were sure you died. In that timeline, yes. But my consciousness was already linked to the device through our attempted co-pilot transfer. When you activated it with my blood, my dying DNA, it created something unexpected. Instead of a clean transfer to a single alternate timeline, we were fragmented, I finished, the truth dawning on me with horrible clarity. Scattered across multiple realities, thousands of them, each containing a version of you and a version of me, living different lives, making different choices, but all incomplete, fragments of our original consciousness. I got out of bed, testing my legs. They felt surprisingly steady, and now you're trying to, what? Collect all the fragments? Merge the timelines back together? Not exactly. The fragmentation is too extensive for complete reintegration. But we can establish connections between key fragments, create a network of consciousness that might eventually stabilize into something approaching our original selves. That's what the recall protocol therapy does. It's not recovering repressed memories, it's connecting to other timeline fragments. Dr. Chen nodded. Each session strengthens the neural pathways between your various selves. As those connections grow stronger, more memories become accessible. I walked to the window. The view was different. We were higher up than I remembered, overlooking not just the grounds of the Institute, but the city beyond. Had we always been this high? Or was this another subtle difference between realities? How many others are there? I asked. Other participants in the protocol? A hesitation. None. You're the only one. I turned to face her. That can't be right. If we were fragmented across thousands of timelines, there must be thousands of others experiencing the same thing. The fragmentation affected different individuals differently. Most were simply overwritten by their alternate selves, their original consciousness effectively erased. Only those directly connected to the device at the moment of activation retained coherent fragments. You and me. Yes, but you're not undergoing the therapy. You're administering it. Dr. Chen looked away. My fragmentation manifested differently. I retained more conscious awareness across timelines from the beginning. Perhaps because I was dying at the moment of transfer. Death has a way of clarifying consciousness. A chill ran through me. How many timelines are you simultaneously aware of right now? 17. Sometimes more, sometimes fewer. They blur together occasionally. The implications were staggering, and in each one you've been searching for me. In each one where I have sufficient resources and awareness, yes. This timeline is the first where I've succeeded in finding you and initiating reconnection. I sat back down on the bed, overwhelmed. What happens now? What's the end goal? Complete neural reintegration is impossible. The divergence is too great, the timelines too numerous. But we can establish a stable network between your most compatible fragments, enough to make you whole again, or as whole as possible. And then? Dr. Chen's expression grew more intense. Then we find a way to stabilize the timelines. The collapse that we predicted in the primary timeline is still occurring, just more slowly across the fragmented realities. Eventually, all these timelines will destabilize unless we intervene. How? The original recall protocol failed. It didn't fail. It bought us time, trying to save reality itself. With one crucial difference, Dr. Chen said, leaning forward. This time, we know what doesn't work, and we have access to thousands of alternate approaches through our fragmented selves. She stood and walked to a cabinet, removing what looked like a more advanced version of the neural interface used in my previous sessions. Are you ready to continue? The next phase is more intensive. Direct connection to multiple timeline fragments simultaneously. I hesitated. What happens to those other versions of me? The ones in other timelines, do they just cease to exist if we succeed? They're already you, Alex, just different facets. Think of it as reintegrating parts of yourself that were artificially separated. But I could see she was holding something back. There's more, isn't there? Something you're not telling me. Dr. Chen sighed. The process isn't perfect. Some fragments resist integration. Some timelines contain versions of you that have diverged significantly from your core identity. Meaning? Meaning that in some timelines you made very different choices, became someone you might not recognize or approve of. The nightmare flashed through my mind again. Blood on my hands, a body on the floor, someone dangerous, potentially. It created versions of us in timelines where our fundamental moral compass developed differently. I felt sick. Are you saying there are evil versions of us out there? I wouldn't use that term. But yes, there are versions of us who, under different circumstances, with different influences, made choices we would consider unconscionable. Absorb their memories, their impulses. Not absorb, reconcile, understand. The goal isn't to become them, but to heal the fractures in your total consciousness. I wasn't convinced. What if those fractures exist for a reason? That's not how consciousness works, Alex. Denying them is denying parts of yourself. Parts that might be better left denied. Or parts that, once understood and integrated, might make you whole in ways you can't currently imagine. She held out the neural interface. The choice is yours. Continue the protocol. Work toward reintegration and eventual timeline stabilization. Or remain fragmented, incomplete, while the timelines continue their slow collapse around us. Put that way, it hardly seemed like a choice at all. When do we start? The next phase of the recall protocol was unlike anything I had experienced before. Instead of recovering memories sequentially, I was thrust into a kaleidoscopic maelstrom of simultaneous experiences from multiple timelines. I was a surgeon, hands deep in a patient's chest cavity. I was a prisoner, staring at concrete walls covered in tally marks. I was a father, teaching my daughter to ride a bicycle. I was a soldier, taking aim at a distant figure. Each fragment lasted only seconds before shifting to another. Yet each felt completely real, completely me. The neural interface Dr. Chen had attached was more sophisticated than the previous equipment, with filaments that seemed to merge with my skin at the contact points. Focus on the constants, Dr. Chen's voice guided me through the chaos. Look for patterns that repeat across timelines. I tried. Certain elements did recur. A preference for black coffee, a scar on my left palm, a tendency to tap my fingers when thinking. Small consistencies in a sea of variation. But other patterns emerged that disturbed me. In timeline after timeline, I saw myself alone. Different locations, different circumstances, but a persistent solitude. Even in fragments where I had family or colleagues, there was a sense of emotional distance, of being fundamentally separate. And in many timelines, far too many, there was violence. Sometimes I was the victim, sometimes the perpetrator. Sometimes the violence was physical, sometimes psychological. But it threaded through my existence across realities like a dark current. There's so much pain, I gasped between shifts. So much anger. That's the fragmentation effect, Dr. Chen explained. Negative emotions tend to concentrate in certain timeline clusters. It's not representative of your whole self, but I wasn't convinced. What if these darker impulses weren't an artifact of fragmentation, but a fundamental part of who I was? What if the integration she proposed would only strengthen these tendencies? As the session progressed, the transitions between timeline fragments became smoother. I began to hold awareness of multiple realities simultaneously, experiencing them as parallel tracks rather than disconnected jumps. In one timeline, I was a researcher like my original self, but working on different technology. In another, I was a professor teaching physics to undergraduates. In a third, I was a patient in what appeared to be a psychiatric facility, sometimes as a colleague, sometimes as a stranger passing on the street. In the psychiatric timeline, she was my doctor. In another, my adversary. The connection between us persisted across realities, a constant amid the chaos. "You're in all of them," I said during a brief return to full presence in the treatment room. "Every timeline where I exist, you exist too." "Yes," she confirmed. "Our consciousnesses were linked at the moment of transfer. We're entangled across the multiverse." As the session deepened, I began accessing memories that felt wrong, not just unfamiliar, but fundamentally at odds with my sense of self. In one timeline, I saw myself deliberately sabotaging a colleague's research out of jealousy. In another, I abandoned a partner when they received a devastating medical diagnosis. And in one particularly disturbing fragment, I saw myself planning something terrible, a mass casualty event at a research facility. My alternate self was meticulously placing explosives around a laboratory while muttering about preventing the collapse and cauterizing the timeline breach. I watched in horror as my other self activated a detonator. The explosion ripped through the facility, dozens died, and as emergency responders arrived at the scene, that version of me watched from a distance, expression cold and satisfied. "No!" I screamed, finally breaking free of the fragment. In the treatment room, alarms were blaring again. My vital signs were spiking dangerously. "Terminate the session," one of the specialists urged. "Not yet," Dr. Chen countermanded. "He's reaching the integration threshold. Just a few more minutes. His neural activity is redlining. We could lose him. We're too close to stop now." Their voices faded as I was pulled into yet another timeline fragment, the most vivid yet. In this one, I was at the Theseus Institute, but as a patient, not a participant. I was strapped to a bed, wild-eyed and raving about false memories and timeline manipulation. Should we terminate? No, increase the dosage. Break down his resistance. We need this timeline secured. With horror, I realized what I was seeing. In this reality, the recall protocol wasn't a therapy or a consciousness transfer technology. It was a form of mind control, a way to overwrite someone's actual memories with fabricated ones. And I was fighting it. The fragment shifted, showing me strapped to a chair similar to the one I now sat in at the Institute. But in this version, I was screaming, begging them to stop as they forced images into my mind. Images of another timeline, of being a researcher, of developing the protocol. "These aren't my memories!" my other self screamed. "You're trying to make me think I'm someone else," Dr. Chen's cold voice. "You are someone else, Alex. You just don't remember yet, but you will." The fragment dissolved, replaced by another where I was examining brain scans, my own brain scans. In this timeline, I was the doctor, and I was concerned about what I was seeing. "The patient is developing resistance to the protocol," I told a colleague. "His actual memories are surfacing through the implanted ones." "That's impossible." The neural pathways were completely rewritten. Apparently not completely enough. He's beginning to remember who he really is. "And who is that?" My timeline self looked grim. "The man who tried to stop us. The man who nearly exposed the entire project before we contained him." The fragments were coming faster now, overlapping, contradicting. In one, I was a hero trying to expose a conspiracy. In another, I was the conspiracy's architect. In yet another, I was an innocent bystander caught in events beyond my understanding. Which was real? Which was me? The session ended abruptly when I went into full cardiac arrest. I later learned that my heart had stopped for nearly 2 minutes before they were able to resuscitate me. When I regained consciousness, I was back in the secure residential suite, with Dr. Chen keeping vigil. "What happened?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Neural overload," she said. You accessed too many conflicting timeline fragments simultaneously. Your brain couldn't process the contradictions. The fragments, they showed different versions of the protocol. Different versions of us. I struggled to sit up. In some of them, you were using the protocol to implant false memories, not recover real ones. Dr. Chen's expression revealed nothing. Those were defensive fragments, timelines where your consciousness constructed false narratives to protect itself from trauma. They felt real. All memories feel real, Alex. That's what makes integration so challenging. Your brain can't easily distinguish between actual experiences and constructed ones. I studied her face, looking for any sign of the cold, calculating Dr. Chen I'd glimpsed in that disturbing fragment. How do I know which version of you is real? The one trying to help me, or the one trying to control me? She took my hand, her touch warm and familiar. You know me, Alex. Across thousands of timelines, you know me. Trust that connection. I looked up at her, a final question forming. And us? The connection I feel with you across these timelines. Is that real? Or part of the treatment too? Dr. Chen's expression softened. That's real, Alex. In your fragmented state, I became your anchor, the one constant your various alters all recognized, though in different roles. Some saw me as a colleague, some as an adversary, some as a caretaker. But all saw me, because you were trying to help me. Yes. I stood up, pacing the small office. So what happens now? If I'm not actually experiencing memories from alternate timelines, but integrating dissociated parts of my own psyche, the goal remains the same. Reintegration, becoming whole again. And if I succeed, what then? Dr. Chen hesitated. That depends on which aspects of yourself become dominant in the integrated personality. If the prosocial researcher prevails, you could return to a normal life, perhaps even continue your work under supervision. And if one of the violent alters prevails? She didn't answer, but she didn't need to. The implication was clear. I would remain institutionalized, perhaps indefinitely. I want to continue the treatment, I said finally. But no more lies, no more metaphors about timelines and alternate realities. I need to know exactly what's happening to me. Are you sure? Your mind constructed those metaphors as protection. Facing the reality of your condition directly could be traumatic. I need the truth. All of it. Dr. Chen nodded. Then we'll proceed with full transparency. But I should warn you, the next phase is the most difficult. You'll be confronting your most violent, most disturbed alters directly. The ones responsible for your institutionalization. Yes, and they're strong, Alex. They've been fighting the integration process every step of the way. Aspects of my own consciousness that had broken away and developed independently. The idea was terrifying. But if Dr. Chen was right, denying them wouldn't make them disappear. They would remain, lurking in the fractured corners of my mind, perhaps growing stronger in isolation. I'm ready, I said, with more confidence than I felt. This time, I was in what amounted to a medical containment unit. A room with padded walls, restraints on the bed, and medical equipment that could deliver sedatives at the push of a button. Your violent alters have physical manifestations, Dr. Chen explained as technicians attached a more complex neural interface to my head. Increased strength, different speech patterns, even altered brain activity. We need to be prepared if one of them takes control during the session. The procedure began as before, with the injection that increased neural plasticity. But this time, instead of guiding me into specific memories, Dr. Chen had me focus on the gaps, the blank spaces between fragments, the moments of lost time that had plagued me throughout my life. Your primary consciousness has been protecting itself by walling off the most disturbing alters, she explained. We need to breach those walls deliberately, under controlled conditions. The first alter to emerge called himself the Professor. He spoke through my mouth, using my voice, but with different cadences, different vocabulary. He was condescending, arrogant, but not violent. He viewed the other alters as subjects for study, rather than parts of himself. The fragmentation is far more extensive than you realize, he told Dr. Chen, using my lips, my tongue, but not my will. There are dozens of us, not just the handful you've identified. Most remain dormant until triggered by specific stimuli. And what triggers you, Professor? Dr. Chen asked. Intellectual challenge. Problems to solve. The host is limited in his cognitive approach. I emerge when more sophisticated analysis is required. It was surreal, being a passenger in my own body, listening to this other version of myself speak as if I were a separate entity, a host for his consciousness rather than the original personality. The professor receded, and others took his place. The protector, who emerged during physical threats. The child, who appeared during moments of extreme emotional vulnerability. Each had their own perspective on our shared existence, their own account of how the fragmentation had occurred. Then came the one they called the architect, the violent alter Dr. Chen had warned me about. The moment he took control, I felt my body tense, my hands curl into fists. The restraints tightened automatically in response to my changed vital signs. "Dr. Chen," the architect said, my voice now cold and precise. "Still trying to put Humpty Dumpty back together again?" "Hello, architect," she said calmly. "We're trying to help Alex integrate his fractured consciousness." "Alex," he sneered, "the weak original personality. Why would you want him back in control? He couldn't handle reality. That's why he created us in the first place." "That's not quite accurate," Dr. Chen countered. "The fragmentation was caused by a neurological condition, not a psychological choice." The architect laughed, a sound so unlike my normal laugh that it chilled me even as it came from my own throat. "Is that what you tell yourselves? That it was all just misfiring neurons? How convenient. How blameless." "What do you believe caused the fragmentation?" Dr. Chen asked. The architect strained against the restraints, my face contorting with rage. He saw something he couldn't accept, something that shattered his precious worldview. So he broke, and we were born from the pieces. What did he see? "The truth about you, Eleanor." Dr. Chen's professional demeanor faltered slightly. "And what am I?" The architect smiled with my mouth. "Not what, who? You're not Dr. Eleanor Chen. That person never existed. You're Ellie Mercer." I felt a shock of recognition so profound it momentarily pushed the architect back, allowing me to resurface. "Ellie?" I gasped. Dr. Chen, Ellie, looked stricken. "Alex, are you back with us?" "You're my wife," I said, memories suddenly flooding in. Not from alternate timelines or dissociated alters, but from my actual past. "We were married. You worked with me on the protocol." "Yes," she admitted. "I was both your colleague and your spouse. But you said you were my doctor. I became your doctor after what happened." The architect surged forward again, seizing control. "After you found out what she did." "Tell him, Ellie. Tell him about the affair. About how you were stealing his research. About how when he confronted you, you tried to have him committed to cover your tracks." "That's not what happened," Ellie insisted, but I could see the truth in her eyes. The architect was laughing again. "The great Dr. Chen, so dedicated to healing her patient. Tell him your real motivation. Tell him why you're so desperate to get the original Alex back." "Alex, don't listen to him," Ellie pleaded. "This altar is manipulative, constructed from your worst fears and suspicions." But I was remembering now. Not alternate timelines or false memories, but the actual events that had led to my breakdown. Finding evidence of Ellie's betrayal, the confrontation in our home laboratory, her denial, then admission. "You're not trying to heal me," I said, fully myself again. "You're trying to erase the alters that know what you did." "That's not true," she insisted. "Yes, I was your wife. Yes, there were problems in our relationship. But I'm trying to help you now. The fragmentation is real. The danger is real. The only danger," the architect said, taking control once more, "is to her career if the truth gets out. That the great Dr. Eleanor Chen built her reputation on stolen research and keeps her husband drugged and institutionalized to hide it." The session devolved into chaos after that. Alters emerged and receded rapidly, each with their own version of events, their own perspective on Ellie and her motivations. Some believed she was helping, others that she was the enemy. Some remembered loving her, others hating her. Through it all, I struggled to determine what was real and what was delusion. Had Ellie betrayed me? Was she trying to help me now, or silence me? Were these emerging memories genuine, or constructs of my fractured mind?